Welcome, everyone. This is the Town of Old Lyme Affordable Housing Commission special meeting, Monday, October 1st, 2021. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the Town of Old Lyme website. In attendance, we have Karen Winters, Bill Beluzzi, George Clow, Jen Miller, Amy Hosier, John Coughlin, myself, Michael Foliano, which is the full commission. This is a special meeting, so the agenda is fixed, and we have two items on it tonight. The first is around the request for proposals for consulting services in support of the 830J plan. Actually, could everyone mute? I'm getting some background noise on there until you speak. So there's the RFP. Everyone should have received that last week for review. So the agenda for tonight will be to take any final comments. There wasn't any feedback that came through during the week, so I expect there won't be much, if anything. And then we'll be looking for a motion to approve the RFP for posting. And that motion, I'll ask that when the motion is made, it incorporates approval subject to any additional changes needed to comply with any legal or procedural requirements as we actually go through the posting process. I don't expect anything major, but just if there's any details and dates or any of the requirements that need to be put in because of legal or procedural requirements, we'll want the latitude to add those this week after this meeting. Okay, so with that, Jen, why don't I turn it over to you?
Okay, like Michael said, we didn't receive any further comments this week on this past week on this. My only comment would be maybe the dates are a little bit subject to change as far as this, it's kind of aggressive as if we prove it tonight, it's posted tomorrow. So, so we probably have to change, slip that out a few. But basically what we wanted to do is follow along the proposed community engagement plan as far as onboarding the RFP provider or the successful candidate by the end of the year so that we can really start heavy in January, February, March with the initial communications plan, and then following that, community forums, and then really into the April and May timeframe, get any feedback from them during the forums and that. So we kind of envision maybe there might be 3 forums during that time frame, for slightly different aspects of each engagement plan. So by the time that we get to early May, we'll have received feedback and input into the plan. We'll have incorporated that into our plan, and then we'll have the final plan approved. So that's the intent of the spacing of the timing. So it's really, before we were thinking, let's get them on board and let's do a splash page for our website and let's, figure these things out, but, and maybe crunch it all into this year. But that seems impossible now, and it probably is impossible. So we're giving the vendors more time to ask questions of us through the month of October. And then looking through before Thanksgiving to select a vendor, and then commencing the project in December. And then, like I said, from February or January, really, but really February to April, they'll hold at least 2, probably 3 community engagement forums. And then we'll incorporate all that feedback into our planning during the month of May for production in June. And the last part is legalities that I highlighted in red, which I wasn't sure that we needed that type of insurance requirements for this type of consulting proposal versus more of a construction type proposal that these are more typical of, where the person has a car and things like that. So that's just a question we have for the whoever processes these things, that probably Michelle Noren for the town of Old Lyme. So does anybody have any questions on the content or any follow-up on the dates? The one question I had, maybe that I was kind of looking for feedback on, were the, if you scroll down to responses must include section, so it's number 5, sub number 1, or responses must include letter of introduction, an outline and description of, our plan, the detailed fee proposals. Those are all pretty standard. But then I added in there things like your qualifications for and experience in the workshops, references, 3 references, and detailed and specific examples of similar work products. Are all of those, do you all feel that those are necessary? I mean, I would like to check at least a couple references, but this is a smaller job for under $10,000. So I wonder if we're being too strict on those particular aspects.
Actually, we might be, where people won't even, being it's only 10 grand.
Mm-hmm. Like, is it worth their time? They might be thinking.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Will they actually respond?
Mm-hmm.
Jenny, I think your point's well taken. Maybe item 8 there, the detailed and specific examples of similar work products. Maybe we could downgrade that to just say examples of similar work products, if available. Yep. And John, I think you're right. Although I'm also pretty sure that consultants have pretty much a ready to rock submission for these things.
Yeah, I mean, generally they'll have resumes. They'll have an outline of what they're going to do. Then they'll have qualifications. Yeah, I guess it's not too bad, but
okay. Well, we'll see what we get, and we can always refine it and ask if we're being too challenging. Bill, you have a question?
Exactly. Go back.
Only that I was thinking what John just said, that we would probably be able to glean that information from resumes. So I don't know if it's, when I did read it, I thought, well, we're asking them for a lot. So I think some of that, especially any examples of workshops and examples of similar projects, I think would probably come up in their resumes, but I'm that's just an opinion that maybe it is a little bit much for a small.
How about this, Bill? So take out, just maybe on number 7, instead of references, maybe just references for ongoing and or recently completed similar planning projects, and just take out municipal, because I also think that there's an aspect of municipal, things that some people haven't dealt with before. That sound okay?
Yeah, and then I don't know if it makes it less onerous if there aren't as many numbers. You could put the
subtext in letters. Yep.
Number 8 could be under in the resume, in the resumes of personnel who work on the project, including experience conducting public workshops and examples of similar projects. I don't know if that's
it's a little bit different, I think, because the resumes of whoever, let's say they assign 2 people to the project, then there would be 1 principal probably and 1 more junior person, and we would want their rate schedule, and then also, so their resumes will be, there, but overall the firm may have, more experience with not that individual, but maybe a different individual in their firm having that experience. So the firm itself may have experience, but not necessarily that one person, if you know what I mean.
And then one final thought, and then I'll get off it. What about under the letter of introduction?
Yeah, from what I've seen, they're pretty standard, just introducing the firm. But yeah, we could put that like as sub bullets, letter of introduction, and then 6, 7, 8 underneath that.
And actually, their letter of induction could have most of this except for the resumes. So it
And
could hit all the items.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. You don't have to go in order 1 through 8. Their letter of introduction could include all of the above.
Exactly. Could. And the one thing is we could float this, and if we don't get any responses, we can peel back. And,
Okay, all right. Well, I'll tweak that up a little bit and I'll change the wording on that. And the insurance then, Michael, we'll just see what the standard is for Old Line Consulting projects on that.
That's
Okay. Okay. So,
Can I ask
hearing-
kind of a point of order? Does the RFP go out as a public announcement, or do we send this directed to certain vendors who we suspect are capable of handling this kind of project, such as
First thing, George.
those people who have already submitted affordable housing plans for towns already in the state of Connecticut?
The first thing you said, George.
it
public.
gets posted first. And you're free to point people to that, but it has to be publicly posted first.
yeah,
So
it'll
you
be
can't
posted
point
on.
people to it before you post it.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve this for posting, subject to the edits that we just discussed and any other procedural changes indicated by the folks that are actually going to be doing this for us?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Karen.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any last discussion?
And Amy, you can vote in the chat when it comes to that.
Actually, Amy and George are in alternate role tonight, so.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So voting members will be Karen, Bill, Jen, John, and myself. And because we are on a video call, I'm actually going to take the roll on this one. So Jen, you're up on the screen.
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and I'll add aye. So it is unanimous. We're good to go. Thank you, Jen, for the work you did on that. All right, which brings us to agenda item 3, which is the development approach options for the McCulloch project. And there was some materials distributed on that. Folks, if I'm getting some background noise, so if you could mute, appreciate that. Okay, so for tonight, 2 things. One, we've been circling around some of the questions about next steps for the McCulloch project. So 2 things for tonight. One is just to surface a description of what the overall flow of the decisions and the recommendation is going to need to look like. And the other is to try to distill our previous discussions into 2 primary options for moving forward with a recommendation for developing the open space envelopes as affordable housing. So first on the flow. So we're basically sitting at does everybody have that, by the way? Does anybody not have it so I don't make you all unmute? Okay. So if you have that flow chart, we're now sitting on the left side of that where we're working through some of the high level options and guidance for how we want to recommend that the town approach this. as we crystallize some of that thinking, we're going to want to review how we propose to move forward with our key stakeholders. And the principal ones are the Open Space Commission and the Board of Selectmen. And then with that thinking and the feedback from our key stakeholders in hand, go ahead and come up with a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. I can envision that the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen would include a recommended option along with some description of the options that were considered but aren't necessarily going to be the first choice. At which point the Board of Selectmen will render a decision on whether or not to accept that recommendation. And if they don't accept it, we'll need to go back to the drawing board, incorporate their feedback, and go through the cycle again. And if they do accept it, then the next step would be to actually get a building committee together to start moving the project. So that's the overall flow. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or discussion on what that looks like.
Can I start?
Go ahead, Karen.
So I just want to point out that this discussion at this point is mostly attributed to the McCulloch property and not as our commission as a whole, correct?
Great question. Yes, I would see what we do on this is specific to the McCulloch opportunity and would not be any form of precedent or necessarily have to apply to future projects.
Okay, and then one other thing that I wanted to point out is that I don't know if there's an option for something in the middle between option 1 and option 2. So for example, we chose to recommend a private developer, but that the town still retained the property.
I could see that one. Let's get into that when we talk about what each of these are, because we can go through the options and what they entail.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's one of the sort of the hybrid options. The other hybrid option would be if we do sell the property and the developer engages people from the town and it actually plays out looking more like the barn raising thing. So yeah, I think there's shades of gray, but then just from a process perspective, I think we need to start down a path and then start to flesh it out.
Fair enough.
There's probably an infinite number of shades of gray in between.
Mm-hmm.
So, but just to the process, I wanted to see if the general steps that we need to deliberate, come up with a recommendation, consider some options, run those through our stakeholders, and make sure that our stakeholders are going to get behind it. Or I don't think it'll be an easy discussion when we get to the Board of Selectmen. Have the Board of Selectmen consider a recommendation, and then with that guidance in hand and that direction set, then form a building committee. So at least the building committee is given a direction to start with for implementing. Okay. Any other? Jen, Bill, John? Just the overall flow of what we're going to try and achieve?
No, the overall flow looks fine.
Agreed.
Okay, then. So we can start to bedevil ourselves with some details. The table that I sent out is an attempt to sort of extract the themes from the conversations we've been having. We've been circling around two primary options here. One is where the town would divest of the property and engage a private developer to take the project forward, in which case the building committee would essentially have a liaison and more of a general oversight role, and the developer would have primary responsibility for all of the aspects of actually delivering on the project, the fundraising and financing, the selecting and bringing on board of all of the architects, engineers, contractors, all of the resources that were needed, doing all the planning and getting the regulatory approvals, actually managing the construction project to a CO, and then from that point, with the construction phase done, actually go on to find occupants and manage the property and the compliance issues going forward. So that's one option. And again, that there's some sub options around that, but if we could try to, for tonight at least, to focus on what the top level choices are, and then we can flesh them out. The second option being more of the barn raising paradigm, where the town would retain ownership. The building committee would actually be the developer in this case and have responsibility for executing the project, including all those things: the fundraising, the contractors and consultants and architects, the planning, the approvals, the qualifying of occupants, and the property management. So that's sort of the top level fork in the road. Maybe just for purposes of discussion tonight, we can start on that, and then regardless of which way broadly that we go, we've also surfaced in prior discussions questions about what would we like to see that that affordable property look like in terms of, is it rental or is it owner occupied? Do we have any thinking around what the target demographic would be? And that doesn't necessarily mean we have to express a choice here. We could say whichever. Do we have any thinking around the target income level that we would look for renters or owners in? The size of it, any other considerations? So if we could start the conversation by looking at that top level fork in the road, and then
I do have one question with Michael.
Shoot.
Just about where, like, we sit there and the big differences from building committee developer. If we go down to fundraising and financing and down, those functions some of those functions, like the actual financing, if we do it as a town, the barn raising, we can find a builder. The builders usually have, avenues to get funding. And they would, because we're not going to build it as a town, we're going to hire a GC. The GC will take on a lot of those functions, as part of their package. In other words, like, they're going to select an architect, the plans and everything else.
Right.
Where the building committee will have some say, but still, if you went out and built a house today, you're going to hire a builder, and the builder's going to, hey, use Guilford Savings Bank. Here, I've got some books of plans, or you can use, here's the architect. You know what I'm saying? So it's sort of a little muddier, and more of, kind of whoever puts this house together is going to take care of everything from fundraising probably down right through, and manage a construction project. The only thing they won't do is identify and qualifying occupants, and then, or they could, but probably not. And then ongoing property management to bottom two. So that whole middle could go either way, for which, for the barn raising.
Understood. Totally understood, John. And yeah, I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see it go that way. The key differentiator there, in my mind, open discussion on this, is who's responsible for it. So if the town owns the property, then
sure, then the end stakeholder will be the town. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
I misunderstood. So yeah, gotcha.
Then
we're on the same page. We're on the same page now. That's fine.
Yeah, with every expectation that they would fulfill that responsibility by outsourcing big chunks of it.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect.
I think Bill has a question.
Go ahead, Bill.
Good comment. I think when looking at these two basic options, if I were not worried about certain aspects of the town having a great deal more responsibility in option 2, that concerns me a little bit. What John just said, I think, does help deal with how you'd move through that. But the idea, barn raising, because this is really going to be no matter what happens, this is going to be the first project that's happened in a very long time, but also affordable housing, and will possibly set the stage for not so much the way affordable housing will go, but the way people's perceptions of affordable housing would go. The barn raising concept, to me, has a lot of appeal in maybe being able to get people behind a project like that. On the other hand, so if, of the two things of just saying, okay, we hire somebody, they're going to come up and do it. They're going to come here and basically we'll give them parameters and so on, but then they're going to just basically see it through. I don't think it would provide the town with as much hands-on excitement, maybe an opportunity to really see something like this as important. So, having said that, it does concern me then, though, that the town would be left if they don't, that they continue to own it and all, ongoing property management, regulatory, statutory compliance. So, on the outset, I think that raising has a lot of potential, and yet I would have some concerns about the responsibilities that the town incurs.
So I think that goes towards what we've heard, a couple of times, and what we discussed previously is sort of the hybrid, model where we could, do it either way that Michael proposed or Michael suggested, and we've discussed before. So I think what I'm hearing, I think, in all of our discussions has been that we want to really get the community behind this and get the community engagement and make this a success story for Old Lyme and affordable housing in general, but that it may be too much of a burden to saddle the town with going forward, even if it's just these two, or if it's these two plus the two Hope properties, or however, that pans out in the end. So, and then to Karen's point, retaining the land, but then turning it over to a developer for the other part could also be an option.
Since I wasn't present at the last meeting, I missed any of that other discussion, but I don't know if the general feeling, there are people on the commission who know the town far better than I do. Is there a general feeling that the idea of doing it ourselves would be, overall something that would be desirable as far as the community involvement and that kind?
I think the barn raising and that would be very desirable for the town, and I don't know as if it is that burdensome forward, because we are now have a affordable housing committee, and having a building committee or a ongoing entity I don't think that'd be too burdensome for the town, because my assumption is this affordable housing will continue in perpetuity.
So just that last point, John, yeah, we're a standing commission, so unless and until
so I'm saying, so kind of we're going to continue to do affordable housing. So it's going to be, for whatever reason, the previous one evaporated for lack of interest or whatever. I'm not sure exactly why. But now sort of we're here, and this is sort of going to be here for a long time. So even if the town retained, because that also, not retaining it also brings up what happens to the $100,000 that we chatted about last time. I don't know if we found anything out about that,
I can talk that a little bit, John. And John, just to
sure.
If the entity that you talked about evaporating was the former Old Lyme Affordable Housing, not
Yes.
for profit, yeah, I would say that's a different type of entity than we are. We're essentially an arm of town government, and we're basically chartered as a planning and advisory committee. So we're not chartered as a building committee. So I would see the town would spin off a building committee, and they would do this project
exactly,
beginning, a middle,
and the building committee would be something would also be ongoing, because we wouldn't, these aren't the only 2 times we're going to hopefully do affordable housing in the town. Hopefully it's a sort of an ongoing thing as
If that
land comes up
project
for
ended,
opportunities.
if that project ended and the committee stood down after that, they would convene another building committee if there was another project. So, but yeah, the process would go on. The other,
Sure.
the other thing you raised was the recouping of what the town spent on these 2 envelopes. And in conversations I've had with Amanda as recently as a couple of weeks ago, and actually before we're done, I'll update you on the status of the testing of that site.
Great.
But it's pretty clear that there's an expectation that the 100,000 that was spent on this property, if it turns out to be developed as affordable housing, would be recouped and reinvested in the town, probably as additional open space, back in the open space fund.
So it recouped, Michael, could you clarify that? Recouped back to open space, or recouped back to the town?
Well, they're the same, but my sense is it would go back to open space and they would recover the funds for their open space investments. But
Any idea how much open space has a budget from the town on a yearly basis?
I don't know what their stipend or I don't know what it would be called. Their subsidy would be from the town.
Yeah, I understand.
But we have this Ames project is moving forward, and that's going to draw on it for sure. But in any case, I've gotten pretty clear signal from open space and from the Board of Selectmen that that's kind of their base case. So if we were to come up with a scenario that did not provide for reimbursement of the 100K, I think we'd need to explain what our thinking was around that and what the benefits would be and try to justify it. Now,
Well, if the town retains ownership of the land, there's your 100K because it's still an asset of the town. But if it goes to developer, somebody's going to pay for it.
Yeah, it's not a liquid asset anymore. It's something.
No, it is not liquid, correct, but it still is an asset on the books.
Yeah.
But
so we could get on that. The other thing is if the option was for the town to retain the land, it could be part of the building committee to raise some funds and provide for some or all of that 100K. So to Karen's earlier point, whichever path we go down, there are some adjustments that could be made to accommodate some of the perceived deficits of one versus the other. But again, just for a planning process, I think we have to pick a path and start to work with it and then run it by the stakeholders. So there's the 2 technical complications I would see with the town retaining the land is one, the expectation, and I think that came up in the documents when Amanda came to the committee last year, and it came up again when Open Space met with the commission earlier this year, is that expectation that the original investment in that property would be recouped. And the other one is, I haven't asked this question straight up, but we would definitely want to check with our stakeholders and see if there was an appetite for the town to be in a property management role going forward.
When you talk about our stakeholders, wouldn't the town residents also be considered a stakeholder, and what their appetite was for that?
Absolutely. But in terms of moving this through an approval process, they'd want to take that into consideration. But they're just rewinding a little bit. We inherited this gift from Open Space, and so essentially we've been given this opportunity. We weren't there at the beginning, but we have an opportunity to see it through. So, at least to some extent, the die has been cast. We can work with it. But the 2 things that at least have been pretty clear to me is first is the expectation about the funds, and the other is that essentially the envelopes are what they are, and the deed restrictions are what they are. So essentially, our option is to put 2 units of affordable housing on those 2 3-acre envelopes as they've been defined.
I don't see that being a stuff. Maybe the 100 grand is a stumbling block, but the second, I don't think that's even come up in a negative vein throughout,
No,
or a stumbling block for us. So I think we're good there. I just think that, as you said, the 100 grand, and then also is the town willing to take on another property for management, which we already are in the property management business because they take care of everything else in the town.
So I think what I'm hearing is maybe to maybe paraphrase both of you is so the money is in one bucket, right? So whatever open space has, if they want if they want/need the 100,000 back to make them whole again, the town in option 2 would necessarily have to just return 100,000 to them out of the town's budget. So that would be how that
no,
works.
not necessarily. That they can add the $50,000 per lot to the building cost of the house to make it affordable, and just build that, do the house accordingly. But generally with affordable, the land is kind of free. So, but if you get a couple acres of land for 50 grand in a line, that's kind of a pretty reasonable deal too.
No, it is, but I mean, so just we have to take into consideration what the cost of the home is going to be then, so and what the structure of the home is going to be, and all those other aspects, which I don't think we can say right now because we haven't even talked about that or where we're going with that. But if, let's say, I'm a private developer or I'm a developer of affordable housing, or I'm a private developer who thinks I can make a little cash off of this, which I don't really see that margin there. But if even if you get the lot for 50,000, then the house is going to be at least, X 100,000. So the margin, like I'm trying to think about what are their profit margin requirements for these developers that would do such a thing. And then how much fundraising, would we have to put in? So from a financial aspect, there's a lot of things at play depending on if we go one way all the way or the other way all the way, option 1 or option 2. And, it's going to be somewhere in the middle.
We really won't know that if option 2 is going to work or not work until we find out from local builders if they're willing to do it, as sort of a lesser profit making, just cover the cost type thing, or they're going to want to be full market. And is there an appetite for that? So I think that's another piece of the puzzle that we've really got to sort of put here.
Whereas a nonprofit developer would already have those expectations, that they're not making any money off of it.
Yeah, but then you also have people that have pride in their town and they want things like this to move forward in the town, and they have altruistic goals also.
So, however, no matter which, if we were looking at these as 2 completely distinct options, in either case, somebody has to pay up $100,000.
Exactly.
In the first one, a builder would have to incur the cost of a builder or any kind of private developer would incur $100,000 to have that land to build on, right? And if we retain it ourselves, we still have to come up with $100,000 to reimburse. This is so. I guess it's sort of like it seemed like we had this gift of. We really don't have a gift of. I mean, it's probably below market value, I guess. But is that correct? It was
definitely below market value.
What? Excuse me?
But wait.
It's definitely below market value.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. But anyway, one way or the other, that $100,000 has to get dealt with. Correct?
Unless the town just allotted it to us, certainly with the Board of Finance or whatever in this feel-good sort of environment. what else about, I mean, I can't imagine that we would consider giving a developer 6 acres of land for $100,000. I can't even understand that. They're a
Yeah, because
developer.
it's deed restricted. It's deed restricted. The only thing they can put there is an affordable house that they have to make affordable. And they can
But they
never
own it.
sell it. It always has to be in, it's deeded forever, affordable.
But they own it. I don't know. I don't know. I if
I
a,
mean,
if a
Hope
developer
owns
wants-
all theirs, Habitat owns all theirs.
If it were the Hope Partnership, for example, I mean, that, it's a nonprofit, you know, I think you have to, you can't put out from the outset that we want Hope to do this, but if Hope owned that, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have any problem with that kind of a thing.
except that Hope wants to
Right.
give back the land that they own. They don't want to be responsible for it.
Well, I think that's because of the, like, changes that took place over time.
But they don't want to be responsible for it. So they you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, Karen, back to the Hope thing, my understanding from the communication we've received is that was suggested as a means to resolve a very specific tax abatement issue, and I'm not sure it's indicative of a broader intent. So
why wouldn't we have the tax issue also and then go forward with Hope?
So if the tax, do we know that if the tax abatement issue is resolved, then that's not their intention, or are we surmising that? We don't know, or we do know?
we have heard nothing from them to cause us to think that it is their intent to generally divest. The only communication we've received is that it is specifically related to a specific tax abatement that does have paths to resolution, has multiple paths to being straightened out. So I'm not sure that specific issue bears on the strategy that we're trying to work out here. Actually, I don't think it is.
I have a tendency to go back to square one, and where I started when I joined this is that I thought we would identify ourselves in the way that Lyme has, where they, chose to do a grassroots effort. They maintained this property, they owned it, and they took it upon themselves to say, we did this. And I very strongly believe that in order for us to get the same sort of support from the townspeople that Lyme has, then we need to behave in the same manner.
So that'd be option 2.
Correct.
Yep.
Are there any incentives for the town to donate this land? In other words, there are, you read, just different things in different towns, and you hear about all sorts of incentives. Do you think there are any incentives to the town for that kind of thing?
I think, Bill, it goes back to what Michael was pointing out, is that the only incentive would be goodwill, right? And maybe potentially the environment we're working in now, it would be goodwill, basically. And that would probably go a long way if the town, the Board of Finance and the Selectmen said, you know what, we're going to find that 100,000 and we're going to, put that land out there for free to either the building committee or the developer, whichever way it goes. I think it would be goodwill, but there's no other like a tax advantage or anything that I'm aware of that they would get from donating it other than your standard, donation to any nonprofit. But like Amanda said, Amanda clearly envisions that money coming back to open space. Now, how that all works between the Selectmen, open space, and the Board of Finance, that's another issue, not our issue. If we can convince the Board of Selectmen to go with either that suggestion or option number 2, then they're sucking up the $100,000 either way.
The only incentive that I'm aware of through my research is actually turned up during looking at the tax abatement thing, and there is a state law out there and a program that provides for the state to reimburse towns for tax abatements that are given for affordable housing. That's the good news. The bad news is that it has not been funded for a while, so it's not actually operating. So it's a hypothetical that if that kind of program were ever to be funded again, you would leave the door open for the town to be reimbursed for tax abatements by the state, which would not be an option if the town actually owned the land, because then there's no tax to abate. So that's the only thing I'm aware of, and I don't see that as necessarily a game changer, because as I said, it hasn't been funded in a while. And I'll just note that back to Karen's maybe your first question on this. I'm thinking pragmatically here. We have this opportunity and there's a clock ticking on it. We're already 2 years into the 5 years. So what we do here, I wouldn't see as precedent setting for all future projects. And my thinking is, let's figure out the path that's going to give us the best shot at having 2 units of affordable housing and 2 households established in town that couldn't afford it to live here otherwise. And I'm completely on board with the barn raising aspect being symbolically really attractive and a great way to start. And if we could do it for this, then it would be good. But if it doesn't turn out that that's the best path for this one, then I wouldn't forget about that for all time. And I would envision that we could find projects where we would design it from the get-go to take that approach. Similarly, if we can, if that thorny issue of the 100,000 we can find a resolution for that, then that would be a good thing. So again, just my thinking is, let's don't let this opportunity wither on the vine, and let's find one path or the other, make it work, with the confidence that it's not going to be set in stone for all future projects.
What about, I wonder if we haven't pressed back hard enough on the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance or whoever it might be, as far as trying to find that money so that we can retain the properties ourselves. As Karen indicated, that would be, and Bill indicated, that's enormous goodwill and shows good faith that we're approaching affordable housing seriously. The town is engaged, and like Karen said, in Lyme, it garnered a lot of support across the board for all kinds of things, and including ADUs. And so maybe we push back on them, or maybe we come up with some points as to why that is the better way to go. And then the developer side of that, or building committee / developer responsibilities and accountabilities on that side, could be Hope, or it could be Habitat, or it could be a private developer or some other developer I'm not aware of, that may want to take it on. So, I mean, what do you think about their receptiveness to hearing some pushback on that $100,000, Michael?
I don't know, but if it was me, I'd probably be more receptive if it was more than just a request, and even if it was more than a rationale for the request, if it also included some ideas on how maybe we could get at least part of the way there, if not all the way there, through other means.
Exactly, and we could put it forth to the people who live in town. I mean, maybe there are people that wouldn't mind helping out, kicking this off.
I don't know if this would count, but there's in the sustainable CT world, there's a community grant challenge. And I don't know if this is included, but I can find out tomorrow. Something like this. They have a whole range of programs that they accept, and they help you basically have a matching grant from the community. So they'll match whatever your community raises, basically, and they help you do the fundraising through various campaigns and things like that. But I'm not sure if it's a fit or not, but I can find out. So just as another angle, I know, Michael, you want to kind of get to a resolution on one way or the other, but what I'm kind of hearing, and we can maybe go around and just see where everybody's landing between 1 and 2. And what I'm kind of hearing is that number 2 would be better for the entire town as far as generating enthusiasm and engagement, and showing goodwill towards this topic overall. And then whether or not the bottom part of that RACI or the responsibilities and accountabilities chart, where that falls is subject to negotiation. But there would have to be a building committee in that process where there wouldn't be one in the other process. Option 1.
Yeah, and of the technicalities, Jen, I would just add a third one is we got the clock ticking. So whatever direction we set has 3 years to get over the finish line, or at least to the point of the transaction where it exercises the option.
Yeah, and it would typically take 2 to 3 years to actually from saying yes to delivering. But if the intent is just by the 5th year to have the transaction in writing, then I think that's plenty of time. Actually,
Well, we were talking, I was just poking around on the town website to see what the budget is for open space, and I'm finding $75,000 a year. So I don't think it'd be unreasonable for asking for some stipend to set us up, to start us off.
To set who up, Karen?
To set us up, if the town would say, okay, well, you can have, or not have, but you know what I'm saying, if they would absorb that $100,000 to get us moving in the right direction. I don't think it's an unreasonable request.
So that would be for a building committee.
Yep.
To start with.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just listening. I'm trying to synthesize everything we're hearing, because we've got. I think everyone agrees that, again, from the symbolic standpoint, more than symbolic, the barn raising paradigm is attractive and a good way to, and likely to be a very good way to get the town engaged. Yet we have some of the realities around the nature of this gift that we've essentially inherited. And to Jen's point about, and everyone's, Karen's, John's, about trying to find a way, at the risk of this seeming like a punt, which I don't intend it as, we may be able to flesh this out as something we bring forward to the stakeholders and say, look, here's what we're grappling with. We understand that there's some expectation about the funding. We understand there's a clock ticking. Our feeling as a group is that the barn raising paradigm is something that would help with the long-term success of affordable housing in town. Balanced against the short-term requirements of actually getting this done within the parameters and the timelines that we're confronted with. So without just kicking the can down the road or dropping it in the lap of the Board of Selectmen, we might have a path where we could have a conversation with the stakeholders. And to our early conversation, instead of just saying, do one or the other, saying, if we do this, here's what we're going to need to do, and here's the ideas that we have for how you would accomplish that. And so instead of picking one option or the other, flesh out the two and saying, these are the items that would need to be considered and accommodated if you go down one path or the other. So if you sell it, we're going to have to think about these things: getting the town engaged, making it feel like a barn raising. If we retain the property, then we're going to have to raise some extra funding, and we're going to have to figure out how it fits in with the town's processes and resources to do property management, and the other laundry list of things that would accompany either fork in the road.
Yeah, I could add maybe just a couple of the sort of, those are kind of considerations that you have, but also on the other side of the considerations would be, for instance, and I can only speak to Habitat, but if they had to pay 50,000 for a lot, instead of, because usually they work with donations, if they had to pay 50,000 for a lot and still build $100,000 home or larger, then, you know, that's a significant amount of effort for Habitat to raise that type of money in this area of southeastern Connecticut. So we'd be calling old line people for donations for sure, but you know what I mean? So it all kind of comes from, you know, contributions either this way or contributions that way to one of the nonprofits. So I think, and then to Karen's point about, could you think about the advertising or the marketing angle on this, where open space is consistently getting 75K a year, but yet we can't afford 50K for a lot to build an affordable house, you know, so that kind of negative publicity, if you will, might not look well, you know. I mean, you don't want to lead with that, but you know, that is a consideration, I think. You know, we were given this gift, it's only 50,000 per lot, and meanwhile, open space gets 75K a year. So, I mean, and we have a significant amount of open space, much more so than affordable housing.
And what we can give away with that. I mean, think about what we could accomplish for 2 families.
So there's some good talking points, I think, all of those.
So what's the thinking around that, the approach of fleshing out the pros and cons of each option and actually generating some ideas on how you could make either of them work and achieve the ends we're looking for. So it would almost bring it together as one approach, but it would depend on whether the first step was to divest of the property or to retain the property, and then basically have the same ends in mind and the same approach in mind, and then figure out what technical path would have to be taken in order to achieve that.
I think the economics of it needs to be ferreted out first. Is is somebody willing to forego the 100, or do we need to come up with it no matter which option we go with? Because that's a kind of, and then you move on.
Well, John, we do have to come up with one way or the other, and it's either going to be because it's
okay.
either $100,000 gift, in which case it's on the taxpayers, or it's
and no matter whether it's option 1 or option 2, we're gonna have to put that into the options.
right.
In other words, the developer will need to have the $100,000, or the town will have it on their book. You know, and the question is how is it dealt with the town, because obviously it's whoever gets the house will lease it for so many dollars a year. You know, I don't know how, however they decide to work that out. So it's going to be an asset that's being, that is on the town books. So I'm not sure how that would be dealt with.
We're also assuming that there's going to be only one developer. Maybe there'll be 2.
Yeah, these are 2 separate.
Right.
Great point, Karen. These are 2 separate properties. There's nothing
That is a good point.
that it has to be done as a package.
Correct.
Although it makes intuitive sense that it might want to go that way, but I don't think it has to go that way.
Correct. Yeah.
No, economies of scale, but that's true. Good point.
So just a question, Jen, your experience with Habitat. So do they typically would they bid in for this kind of a project, or are they come in to work with people, like as a partner with people?
Sure. Yeah, it could go either way, Bill. So let's say, for instance, if we get a house donated to us that just needs fixing up, and we go out and we find a candidate family for that house. There's generally 2 mortgages, because the house value, let's say, is $250,000. They can only afford 30% of their income is what we target. I'm pretty much an old line. We would probably target a little bit higher income, but 30% of the AMI of their income is what their first mortgage is for. And once they pay off that first mortgage, then we forgive the second mortgage. and they can stay there as long as they want to, still, whatever. And, that generally happens at sometime between the first mortgage and the second mortgage, they move out, and the kids are gone and they downsize to a smaller house or something like that. Or they are successful and they move on to they don't need a house anymore, but the house is always deed restricted. So, that mortgage never goes away, really. Then the other house, if we're deeded a property, then it's the same thing. Usually we're given the property. Sometimes we've bought properties in East Lyme, in Norwich. We bought some properties there. And then those houses are built, but Habitat has very strict guiding standards for what a Habitat house is. It's a comfortable, safe environment to live in. It's not it's not a fancy house. So, so their houses are generally between 100, even southeastern Connecticut, between $100,000 and $150,000 to build. So that money has to all be raised by Habitat of Eastern Connecticut through donations and things like that. But we're also donated, like Eversource donates things, the Door Store donates doors, Anderson donates windows, Lowe's donates things, so we get a lot of donations that go into building the house from these larger companies that we have, contacts with. So that's kind of how that works.
Thank you. So,
and in this case, it may be possible for the old, it may be possible to tap into donations from these companies too, but it would be, it's kind of a one-off for them versus they get a lot of advertising from us as far as their goodwill goes.
So Michael, is it possible, since our seems to be the barn raising concept is a good one, to say that is what our recommendation would be. However, with X number of concerns that we would have to, would have to deal with. I think at least it would. I think it's important for the commission to go on record as to saying this is what we think would be best for Old Lyme, even if there are the following concerns that need to be ironed out or whatever, rather than here's two options and here's the pluses and minuses of those two options.
Bill, I think, yeah, but if I get out of my chair here on the commission and I try to sit in the chair of the Board of Selectmen as the executive here, if I was on the receiving end of that, I'd want to hear more than this is how we feel about it, and these are some of the concerns that we have. I think it would be incumbent on us to provide some solutions or some suggested solutions. So that
why don't we come up with a roadmap? I mean, why don't we figure out where everybody is tonight as far as like option one or option two, and then where we have the most. It seems like a lot of people like the barn raising, so then we come up with a roadmap to make the barn raising work, and then say, hey, first Selectmen, we need help with the $100,000, and option one is the town abates it. Option two is, there's some fundraising involved. And every stumbling block we have, well, no matter which the solution is, we can sort of, somewhat toss some of it back to them, because obviously we were taught, this is a gift with, the white elephant. But it's, very doable, but we should take the temperature of everybody on the committee and then move forward accordingly.
Yeah, I'm good with that in general, John. I'm just thinking through what I would be less comfortable with on that. So would be if that basically said we didn't hear you about what the parameters were. I think we have to say, okay, we understand these to be the parameters. We have this concept that we'd like to incorporate into our recommendation, and be relatively definitive about how we would see that going forward. And so that we're basically not saying to the Board of Selectmen says, this is what we think would look best for the town. There are these details that need to be worked out, and sort of good luck with that. I think we need
Well, I
to,
think we should get the details before we give them a final plan. In other words,
Yeah.
100,000, that's a big
have
thing.
some ideas. And I'll be honest with you, the other thing that's concerning me is that this is a really important part of what we're doing, but it is taking a lot of our time right now, and there are other things that are starting to build up behind it that we need to engage. Planning and the 830J plan among them. There are legislative changes that are back there. So I don't want to go through our whole backlog agenda, but just from getting our whole job done as a commission, we need to find a fairly expeditious path to get this project in the hands of a building committee so that we can get on with some of the other things that we're doing and take more of an advisory role on it.
So then why don't we decide which direction it's going and give it to the building committee with that direction, and sort of put a committee together and give that recommendation to the first selectman, or the selectmen, Board of Selectmen.
I would be reluctant to do that if it included, there's this $100,000 gap you got to figure out.
Right. Yeah, I think where you were going originally, Michael, with your summary of putting together, this is how we might do it. So there's the goodwill, the engagement, the need for affordable housing, all of that is all clear. There's this $100,000 issue that we don't, if we pass it on to the developer or we pass it on to the nonprofit, or we raise it, somebody raises it, the building committee raises it. Could the building committee, once they're assigned this task, could they raise $100,000 to give back to the town? That would be like issue number one. Then they would have to hire a general contractor, unless that person would want to work for free. So there's not just 100,000, there's 100 plus whatever it's going to take for these people to do the work. So, so where is all that? I mean, that's continually fundraising for quite a while, unless we get mega donors, which would be awesome. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen, even with the support that we've gotten in the community so far. So,
yeah.
I have another thought. What if we had a caveat in there that the homeowner had to pay the land price back as part of their rent? And so what happens is the town, and I'm just speaking out loud, guys, I'm just throwing it up against the wall. If the homeowner had to pay that back over 30 years or whatever, the town is just simply getting their money back. So we're not asking them to give us that. We're asking for time.
So it would be incorporated into the sale price if it went down in ownership.
Correct.
Path, or the rent. If
You're looking at 30 years, you're looking at a payment of $138 a month. So we're not asking for a gift, we're asking for time. We're asking for a gift of time.
Yep. So that's exactly, Karen, the kind of thing I think we would flesh out.
Mm-hmm.
But the reluctance I expressed was to just basically transfer a $100,000 gap to the next, because my biggest single concern about this is we wind up iterating on this through different entities, and then it's 2024 and the option expires. I think that's the very last thing we want to have happen.
I mean, maybe we need to not do it like Hope or Habitat or Lime. Maybe we figure out Lime's way to make this happen.
yeah, and it will all depend on what you're trying to qualify the candidates at. So is it X percent of their income, which should be 30%, because that's the national United States, federal housing guidelines, is 30% of your income goes towards housing. So that should be what they pay. So now how do we qualify them as far as their AMIs for a family of 4 income? So is it 70,000? So is that what we're targeting? So if we're targeting an 80% AMI family, then that probably is affordable to pay the lot. But if we're paid the extra 138 a month, but if we're targeting somewhat less than 70% of AMI, then, you know, that it just goes, it depends how you qualify the family. That's all.
Well, I think it's okay for us, for our first projects, to lean towards the higher income to get it where we want it to be. I don't think the decisions that we're making today are for every house, every project, every opportunity. But I think for this one, maybe this is the way we go. We're not going to, we're not going to be able to help everyone, certainly, but we'll be able to help some people. And then the more support we have, maybe people will donate money to us. Maybe people will really give to the cause and believe what we're trying to accomplish.
Give to the building committee, not to us, but.
Don't,
The big us.
somehow, doesn't I'm just trying to think of one way, let's say it was a completely private developer. Somehow, they have to recoup that $100,000 also, right? I mean, either the $100,000 one way or the other, if it's going to be sold to a developer.
Yeah, it's going to add it to the
develop.
house price. Yes, exactly.
They'll they'll incorporate into the sale price or into the rent if they decide to do rental. And Karen, I like where you're going with this. Now we're in a little bit of brainstorming mode, but working that through. So if the approach to close that gap, that funding gap, was to incorporate it into the cost of ownership or rental of the property, if it was important for the town to retain the property long term, then that would say it would have to be rented. Otherwise, if it was going to be incorporated into a mortgage, then it would just be the town selling the property to the final owner rather than to a developer, but it would still be a sale model.
But the property has to always be deed restricted forever.
If we want it to count under A30G, it's going to need a deed restriction.
It has to be deed restricted.
And then it would go under the state definition of affordable, which has.
Yeah, so if they sell it, they can only sell it to a family that requires affordable housing.
Right.
So that's the issue with turning it over like that to just the town to manage that. I mean, who's going to be there to manage that turnover? I don't know.
How about if we're looking at it as rent? So the rent for the property is substantially more than it is in Lyme, for example. But this is where we are. This is what we're starting with today. And it doesn't mean we can't do it better or differently for the next project, but this project alone. So it's the rental, let's just say the rental was $125 a month, just to make it simple. And who's to say that once they reach $50,000, that the town's gotten back that $50,000, we don't continue to get that, because that's how we fund the next project and the next project. I mean, if you're living in a condo, your HOA fees are going to be higher than $1.25.
But not if you're living in affordable housing in a condo.
But in order to pay for that project, right? If it's a rental,
It's just a management who's gonna, that's the only, I mean, it's doable for sure. It's just, that we're setting these two properties, like Karen said, just these two properties as a start. We could say that this rent, is maybe how, like, it probably have to be more than like a 1 year rent, kind of, we have to have a lease, I would think beyond a year, otherwise the house could be trashed. So that's the other problem with leases, is that they know they're only going to be there for a year and they don't care what they do to the house.
I know we're not even at that point with Michael's questions, but I do not think this is sustainable for a renter. I think this is only for a property owner. I just don't think it accomplishes what we're hoping to accomplish, and I don't think it's sustainable.
I totally agree with you there, 100%.
Me too.
Wow, I
agree.
heard a quick point of consensus there. Was this on the ownership versus rental thing? I'm going to capture that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
100%.
home rental takes too much of
Because
you.
we'd forever be having to fix up those houses.
Yeah.
Some of these people don't even have cars, so.
Well, I don't think I don't think that target group accomplishes what we're hoping to have. We're trying to make people or help people have a better life and have a commitment to our community and to believe in themselves and to believe in us and to, to give back. And it's good stuff.
Yeah, so maybe that's another thing, Michael, we should kind of, you know, I could just lay out some of the parameters. So if maybe it's 60 to 80% of AMI, and what that means as far as payment. So if your earnings rather, so if you're earning 60 to 80%, then you qualify for these two particular McCullough properties. We can take a look at what that financially looks like and then what the 30% of affordability means, to Karen's point about what that mortgage incorporating the lot would be. That's a pretty easy do for a family of four, let's say.
Well, let me jump back then, Michael, and say, based on the perk tests or whatever they're called, what's the ability that we can build on these properties? Do you know?
It's in the hands of Ledge Light right now, so the testing has been done. What I heard was that one of the lots looked like a completely clear sale, and one of them might have some ledge that would need, but not a showstopper. So one might need some site work, but not a.
So we don't have any idea in terms of bedrooms, how many we'd be able to have or not? Are we still just waiting for that information?
We're waiting for Ledge Light to come back, but what I understand was one of them was a pretty clear sale, and one of them might need some site work, but not might need a showstopper. Didn't get any sense of what the capacity was.
We might have an easier time doing the questions on the back of the sheet. No, I'm saying the back because I printed it up on the back and front. But owner occupied is really, we've pretty kind of weighed in on that, right? Not a rental. Personally, I think for the demographic, I think workforce is the most sellable one. Like starter. And I took that to mean starter as a person starting out, like a single or a couple. And then senior, generally, you're looking downsize, and I mean it could be. So I thought that 60 to 80% is what I had circled, and I put down 3 bedrooms. I don't know. I'm thinking that all of that is sort of like a middle of the road, and with the idea of what Karen just said, like people getting behind, helping somebody who's out there working, it's a struggle for them, and maybe with a leg up, you give them an opportunity to own, a home, send their kids to these schools in a nice community like this. How we get to the other side of the sheet, I'm not sure yet, but
yeah, let's go there. But let me preempt you just for a minute, because I'm just turning over the owner occupied thing, and I'm wondering aloud if we just didn't solve come in upside down and solve the higher level thing. Because if we're going to go owner occupied, and the funding would be incorporated into the sale price and the mortgage, then it follows that we're going to go through a sell the property path. It's just a matter of the timing and who it gets sold to. Because if that's the proposal to close the 100K gap, then we're going down it by definition, we're going down a sell path. And again, it's just in the details of what the path of that sale is.
Yep.
Could you do a sell path? Could you do the sell path and somehow put in the whole thing that this is going to be expected to be a community project?
Yeah, Bill, your mic's breaking up a little bit too. If you could just move a little closer to your mic, I think it might help.
I don't know. Any better?
Say some more stuff.
Any better? Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, I was just if we could, because the thing about the community build, the barn raising is simply the idea of getting everybody involved, and even, you know, like when you talked about where they donate and getting people perhaps in town to donate, all of that stuff, could that still happen with a, you know, by selling the property to a developer? It's like marry these, but in the best sense, like have the retain what we want to for the barn raising piece. What happens after that, I think, is less. You know, I don't think having the town own it after that is particularly important to it being a town project. So I don't know if we can marry that. Obviously, if it was a nonprofit that came in with it, maybe there's a way to do that easier. So I don't know if it could be in the, you know, in the whole, what goes out, the RFP or what, you know, whatever it is that we put out.
So I think what you're describing, Bill, is that we go down a path. So we won't define the beginning of the path. We define the end of the path is that there is a property and an improvement on that property in the form of a home that is sold to someone who qualifies for affordable housing and is sold as affordable housing. And if you back up to where we start, then I think what we're describing here, and check me on this, is the building committee would have the responsibility for developing the property. It would engage a general contractor developer, ostensibly one that had experience in this kind of project. And the town would in effect not be donating the property. The town would in effect be providing the construction loan or the bridge loan to get the property developed, and then it would be sold at the end of the process instead of the beginning of the process. So the town would be more of put in the position of financing or partially financing the project by not selling it up front and requiring the developer to come up, or whoever was developing it, to come up with the funds up front. Does that make sense? So essentially the town would act as the bank with the construction loan, or part of it going through.
I don't propose that the town ever sells the land because it's an opportunity to gain more money. Potential income from the property will inspire or fund additional projects. So I don't propose that we ever sell it. It belongs to the town.
I
The
think what
homeowner will
Karen-
own the house and the town will lease the land for 99 years or whatever it's going to be.
Right.
So the line model.
Yeah, without a
Yeah.
doubt.
Yeah, but I think in Lyme, they don't incorporate the property into the mortgage, right? So it's just, but we would just kind of start off that way by, let's say, adding the $130 to the mortgage.
Well, it's a rental fee.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be through the mortgage. It's a rental fee.
It's a monthly rental fee for the land. Like there's a development down in Milford called Lexington Green. That's what the developer did actually, and that was for profit. But this totally works in a nonprofit setting because then it's always affordable housing.
Okay, so the town in that case would treat those two envelopes as income properties.
Right. Yeah, so that's how we fund future projects.
I'm just
Like
trying
a
to think,
stipend every year.
how would we, so it comes down to what John started off with originally, as far as the building committee would then have to select a general contractor, and whether that general contractor be from a nonprofit or from a for-profit developer, or just somebody in town that's a general contractor, and project manage the project all the way through on behalf of the building committee, who's solely accountable for all of that getting done. So I'm just thinking here to what you said, Karen. So there's no, in my mind, it would forever have to be deed restricted. So therefore, that could be done by the town owning it, right? And then that 130 or whatever it is, that would just be the rental fee for the property, for the land, the real property. And then the home would have a separate fee, right? Okay, I got you now.
How does the developer or the contract, how do they get paid along the, do they
It would have
just,
to be through fundraising, wouldn't it?
What was the
No,
question,
they
Bill?
actually, you
How
get
does
a
the
construction mortgage from, they would get a construction mortgage to build the house portion.
And potentially state grants too, if it's
Liberty Bank
affordable.
or something.
Yeah, there's state grants, you can, I mean, there's a number of banks credit you that would do the funding, because they're gonna have a mortgage on the house, not the land. And then, the town will own the land.
Yeah, we use Liberty and Dime quite successfully for those types of loans.
Essex Savings Bank and Guilford Savings too are really engaged in those sort of projects.
and they then get paid out of when it goes to get a mortgage, when the property is mortgaged, that's how, and that's how they pay off that loan, if they're, whatever it might be.
So when you get a construction mortgage, so in my case, when I built my house, you go in 3 or 4 pieces. I can't remember, it was a long time ago. Like you get these 10 things done and then they give you a certain amount of money, and then you get the next 10 things done and they give you a certain amount of money. At the end, it converts to
They're called progress payments. Yeah, progress payments.
at the end,
as
it
the
rolls
progress is
into our
made, then-
traditional morttage.
And as we discussed,
Exactly.
I would think the building committee is going to be responsible for this, but my expectation would be that the building committee would bring in a developer that knows the ropes.
Exactly.
Correct.
Well,
And most guys
read
who
this back
build
to-
houses know.
Let me read this back. So I sense that we're coming together on a path here. So let me start at the end. So at the end, there is an owner occupied house on a town owned parcel of land that is leased to that owner. And that also incorporates closing that 50K gap for that block over a long period of time, to be defined. And then you move up to where do we start? And it starts more looking like option 2, the barn raising, where the building committee has responsibility for all of the aspects of developing the property, and would be expected to engage developers, contractors, all the resources they needed in order to make that happen. So they would have more of a direct oversight than a liaison role. It wouldn't be just selling it to a developer. So that would be the path, and to closing the 100K gap would come through leasing the land that would be retained by the town. And then we can go through that and say, okay, if we go down this path, here's what it means for the town, and what would have to be acceptable to the town in order to do this, and here's the upside in terms of what it would give the town. So we could do a pros and cons thing. And then either way, I think whatever we present as a primary, we present as secondary, and then if for any reason that wasn't acceptable to the stakeholders and ultimately to the Board of Selectmen, to say then the only option after that is to sell the whole piece to a developer. If the extension of the reimbursement didn't work, or any of the responsibilities for property management just on the land were unacceptable, then that would be a fallback. But as a primary, go in with that owner-occupied leased land, and the lease to incorporate the reimbursement price for the land.
I love it.
I think it's great.
All right, I think this is something we can write up. Good. And then what we can do is, I'm just looking at our flow chart. So what we do is put this together as simply as possible, and then run it by open space and the Board of Selectmen. Just say this is what we're thinking, and if we got a positive positive read on that, then we can actually bring it to the Board of Selectmen as a proposal and see if we can't get this thing moving.
I think it's good stuff. This is good stuff.
That's great.
Yeah, and I would have those talking points that we discussed earlier, Michael, about, during the discussion with open space and with the town, about the upside and the downside, kind of from a goodwill perspective.
Yeah, and the downsides are, we'll see how much of a downside it is to basically close that gap over
Right.
time versus do it in one
Right.
shot. And that may not be that might be fine. But I think it's a good way to bring it together. All right, we're at a quarter to, I'm good, it's 6:45. You want to take this any further, or do you want to checkpoint it here? I don't see the need to vote on anything at this point. I sense there's a consensus to go down this path we just described and write it up and take it to the next level and put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
I agree.
Sounds great.
Good, Jen, you
Yeah.
good?
Yes, sorry, I was just reading.
Amy, you're still out there? Can you through chat or something indicate your preference? I don't know if Amy can hear us.
Yeah, write it in the chat message.
Yeah. George, thoughts?
I think it's fine. My only question, because I've just kind of looped myself back into your guys' discussions in the last month, is in terms of the definition of private developer, was that discussed as to why that was labeled private developer rather than private nonprofit?
Private would include for-profit and
Yeah,
not-for-profit. It's just not public.
Not the town.
Yeah, not the town.
Yeah,
Okay,
we could
so-
clarify that.
So the whole partnership would fall under option one.
Or potentially option two. It's just how they fall in. Yes.
Well,
Yeah, I think anywhere you see the word developer on option two, it could be either a nonprofit or a public developer or a private developer.
well, it kind of goes back to Karen's point before we started the discussion as to, whether you sell or whether you retain property would most depend on what whole partnership would want to do when they develop the property rather than what we tell them. So in other words, they're likely to walk away from a proposal where we dictate the terms. And I didn't know whether that had been taken into consideration.
I think we should find an approach for that, George, where
Well, I know
Write
that
it up.
Jen, I don't know, Jen understands Habitat's position on ownership versus,
Yeah, I don't think that we would solely do the project work and then have the town be the, if you will, the rent collector. Definitely not.
yeah, so I was just making that observation. I just didn't know where Hope Partnership fit into the definition. But thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, this is out of Habitat scale anyways. We wouldn't be able to do this type of project for that amount of money.
So I'll tell you what, I will take a stab from my notes and just put a framework together on this, and then we'll circulate it and take it up at our next meeting. But I'm going
Sounds
to try
great.
and, this is really good. This is the power of the collective brain in action, and really happy with where we got. I think we got something to work with now. So
Yeah,
good.
me too.
Mission accomplished for tonight. Still a long way to go, but real progress. Thank you, everyone. for
Amy,
hanging
if you have
in.
any thoughts, you could just email me with your thoughts if you have any. Okay.
Okay. So if there's nothing else on item 3, I'll go through item 4 really quickly. There's a bunch of meetings coming up I just wanted to make you aware of. So starting tomorrow, there's this regional housing plan with Rivercog. Amy and I are going to be attending a liaison meeting on that, and we're going to get some updates on the status of the regional housing plan and a survey. We're also going to get Rivercog's plans to convene a public meeting where they're going to reveal what the regional housing plan is starting to look like. We're hopefully going to get a preview on that tomorrow night, and we'll be putting something up on our website and something on the town website to alert the residents of Old Lyme that Rivercog is planning a presentation on what they're thinking about for the regional housing plan. Hopefully we'll get some more data on that survey too tomorrow. So that's coming up. That public meeting is scheduled for Tuesday the 12th, a week from tomorrow, and that'll get advertised out to the townsfolk that want to attend that. Also on the 12th, there's a zoning commission meeting in town, and there's going to be, my understanding is there's going to be a public hearing on the proposed zoning changes for Halls Road, which might be of interest. 2 days later, same agenda item on the planning commission. So that's stuff not related to the commission. For us now, we currently have scheduled, or at least agreed to schedule, I have not scheduled it yet, another special meeting starting at 5 o'clock on October 20th. That's Wednesday, which is just before our regular monthly meeting that starts at 6 o'clock on October 20th. And what we'll do in the special meeting is to have more of a planning session where we'll look at we'll finally hope to get to wrap our heads around the community engagement plan and the strategy that for the 830J plan, and spend some time brainstorming on that. If we make anything like the kind of progress we made on the McCulloch project that we did tonight, we'll be in great shape. And then we'll adjourn that meeting and immediately go into the to the regular meeting at 6 o'clock. So we'll have 5 to 6 as a special meeting as a workshop, which will adjourn, and then go into the regular meeting at 6. So that has the effect of not needing a separate day. It'll shorten the agenda for the regular meeting, and it'll let us kind of move as we discussed earlier, move our start time back a little bit to 5 instead of 6. So those are the upcoming meetings. I'll put these all in an email update to you all. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up on it. And in the regular meeting on the 20th, we'll have the standing agenda, the updates, the housekeeping, approval of minutes, and so on, any new or other business that comes up between now and then. So the things that definitely need to be in your calendar are the special meeting at 5 o'clock on the 20th, preceding the 6 o'clock regular meeting. And both of those are going to be by video again. Hopefully we'll get Amy connected, and we'll take it from there. Okay, any questions on that?
Yeah, just Michael, I think I had told you in an email, I have a previous appointment for it's the last meeting for my daughter's wedding on the 20th. It's in I think it's at 4:30, but in any event, so don't count on me for the quorum, but can I join in at any time if we're finished, and can I join into the meeting? Does it work okay that way if I'm free?
You certainly may, Bill, although I don't encourage you if you're doing wedding planning and have your family around you. I don't envision, based on the agenda, that any ships are going to be sailing that night. So
Okay.
You'll have time to influence the process downstream and enjoy your family.
All right. Don't know how it's all going to end up that day, but anyway, we'll see. Just wanted to let you know.
Good. Thanks for the heads up, and you are absolutely welcome to join. But enjoy the time. We'll have lots of meetings.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Anything else under item 4 we need to talk about? We can add items. All right, which moves us to the high point of the evening. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. It's Jen.
Okay,
Well, I'll
Jen.
second it, Bill's either way.
Okay, who was the second?
Tom?
And then Bill.
Okay, we got 2 seconds. Jen made the motion. Bill and John, second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
John, Bill, Karen? Aye. I'm an aye. Thank you, everyone. That was I think we got to a
Good
good spot.
meeting, yeah. Yeah,
Very much appreciate it.
good engagement. Thanks, everybody.
Good job. Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, thanks.